Yo book nerds, I just finished reading Peter and the Starcatchers. If you don't know about this series, it is the first in a series of 5 books, and it's all about Peter Pan. And the first book is kind of the origin story of where Peter Pan comes from. And I had actually read this before when I was in middle school. This is middle grade, and that's why I'm reading it now. I am rereading it for middle grade March. And I want to continue into the series because this is the only book in the series that I've read so far. I'm so glad that I reread this because I forgot so much. Because honestly, I probably read this when I was like 9. And so rereading it has been so fun because I have been reading a lot of heavy stuff this year so far. I've read a couple classics. I've read some books with very heavy emotional content. And so I needed something that was easy and light and fun, and that is exactly what I got with this. When I started reading it though, I was still in that analytical mindset that is required of you when you read classics. And so it took me a little while to let go of my analytical brain and just enjoy this story. Because this is middle grade, and while you can be analytical about it, it's more just for the fun of this story is why you're reading it. And once I was able to let go of my analytical brain, I just was along for the ride, and I flew through this so fast. It's about 450 pages, and so the vibes that I kind of got from this were more geared towards the Peter Pan that you get from the Disney movie, the animated Disney movie. Not towards the OG Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. I mean, there's some crossover obviously because that's the story that influenced the Disney movie, but they are pretty separate beings, I feel. I feel like the original Peter Pan is much more wild and childish, and he is just like, you can't tell that Peter Pan anything because he just does what he wants when he wants, and he's kind of, you know, like a dog. Like, his attention span's like this big. It's like, ooh, this has my attention, now this, now this, now this. And that is the original Peter Pan, in my mind anyway. The animated Disney Peter Pan and the Peter Pan I got from here, they're a little more normal. They can rationalize, they're more human. And it kind of makes sense because this book is a Disney edition. It's published by Hyperion. And so yeah, I definitely picture the Disney Peter Pan much more than J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan. But I thoroughly enjoyed this story. I am gonna talk about it a bit, but I feel like everyone pretty much knows who Peter Pan is. And so I can't really spoil too much of it. So spoiler alert, if you don't want to know things, then fast forward. But I'm pretty much going to talk about things that relate to the movie. So if you've seen the movie, I won't be spoiling anything for you. But I'll try my hardest not to spoil anything that actually happens in the book, if that makes sense. So this book, for being middle grade, I actually thought was pretty complex. The basic plot, to kind of set you up, is Peter is a human and he's an orphan, and he's sailing on this ship, and he meets Molly, and Molly is a member of this group called the STARCATCHERS. And I won't get into too much about what they are so that I don't spoil it, but they're the good guys, and then you have the others, and the others are the bad guys. But those aren't the only good and bad we have in this book. There's multiple bad guys and there's multiple good guys. So the main setup is Peter, Starcatchers, and others. But you also have pirates, you have the indigenous people on the island, you have the mermaids, you have animals. So you have all these different groups that all have their own interests at heart, and some are good and some are bad and some are kind of in the middle, and they're all kind of mixing together in this story. And so I'm kind of impressed with how complex that is when it's geared towards younger children, but I really enjoyed all the different push-pulls from all these different dynamics. There also was some adult humor in this book that I did not pick up on when I was younger, obviously. And it just made me think of how in a lot of children's movies there is often adult humor sprinkled in that goes right over the kids' heads. And yeah, some of the adult humor in here, yeah, went totally over my head when I read this as a kid, but reading it now it's like, ah, I got that. That's hilarious that that's in a kid's book. So this is why you should read middle grade as an adult, because you might get some things you didn't get when you were younger. So kind of leading into the Disney movie aspect of it, this is the origin story, like I said before. So we learn how Peter is able to fly. We learn where Tinkerbell comes from, although she's not called Tinkerbell in this. We learn about Hook and how he got his hook. We learn about the crocodile and the indigenous people on the island and where the name Neverland comes from. Even down to tiny little details like where Peter got his little knife. That's all in here. And we learn where mermaids come from too. And oh my gosh, the mermaids, I loved the mermaids. All the scenes with the mermaids were just awesome. So the story actually follows a few different plot lines at the same time, so the chapters kind of jump back and forth. The chapters that were following the mermaids, I just couldn't wait to read those, and I would just like fly through the other chapters just so I could get back to the mermaids, because I just loved the mermaids in this story. I could not get enough of them. So that is all kind of spoilers for the Disney movie, but it doesn't really spoil anything about the plot. So if you know the Disney movie, you already know those things happen going in, so this is just how we get there. And it's so interesting. But now I'm going to talk a little bit about the book itself, so just forewarning. I feel like at the end of this there was some foreshadowing, specifically with Molly, and maybe I'm totally wrong, but I'm just like going out on a limb here. Molly is a young girl like Peter in this book, and I have this feeling that she will become Mrs. Darling, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I guess we'll find out maybe in the future books, but I just have this feeling that she will show up again, and I don't know why I think she'll be Mrs. Darling. I just think maybe that'd be really cool if she were Mrs. Darling and her daughter was Wendy. I don't know if that's true or not. We'll find out, I guess, but I just got that kind of foreshadowing, I guess, at the end of the book. We'll see. So overall, I seriously enjoyed this reread, and it was exactly what I needed during middle grade March. It was perfect timing. If you've read this, let me know what you thought. And I really think if you haven't read it, you should give it a try. It's so much fun. I honestly felt like a kid on an adventure on a pirate ship, and there was treasure and mermaids and flying, and oh, it was just great. I loved it. And so there's a few days left of March. And so to finish out middle grade March, I am going to start the second book, which is Peter and the Shadow Thieves. And so the cover of this kind of gives me Peter Pan, the movie, and Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie vibes, because it looks like it's Peter and Wendy flying out the door, and that's his shadow. I don't know if this is supposed to be Wendy or if this is supposed to be Molly. I guess we'll find out. I don't know what the Shadow Thieves are. I'm just very intrigued. I don't know if this will be Dave Barry and Ridley Pearson's version of the actual Peter Pan story, or if this is still like before that or after. I have no idea. I don't really know anything about this next book, so I'm really excited to jump into this. If you've read this, let me know if you liked it or not, but don't give me any spoilers, please, since I actually have not read this one now. And if you guys are participating in middle grade March, if you have been reading middle grade books, let me know what you guys have been reading in the comments, because I would love to hear about it. I am going on vacation, so even though I recorded this in March, this will be going up in April because of my vacation. So sorry for the delay, but I had pre-recorded stuff, so that's why there was no breaking content. I don't want to do that because I really enjoy making these videos for you guys. And I really enjoy having discussions with you guys. That's the whole purpose of my channel. I want someone to talk to about books. But that is all for this week. I will see you guys next week. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I put out new videos every Monday. Thanks for talking books with me.